All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And yeah, I did say ladies, because I'm going to be doing a rear tire replacement and rear brake pads replacement on my 99 FLH, and I thought I'd do a video on it because I noticed a lot of people, they remove the pipe on the one side to get the axle out, and there's just no reason to do that. It eventually hourglasses the header pipe, and the Torco clamps are 2-time at best use only. And if you crank them down beyond that just to keep the slip-on muffler tight, you will hourglass the pipe ahead of it. And that's not a good way to go. And really, I'd rather not mess around with the slip-ons whenever I don't have to. Not that they're hard to take off and put back on again, but with the rubber-mounted engine, they do tend to move back and forth quite a bit, and if the tension isn't proper on the Torco clamp, you will wear the pipe going forward out. These clamps here, of course, this is an aftermarket Torco that came with the slip-ons, but this pipe here under the shield, where it clamps, will hourglass. So I tend to leave them alone as much as possible. Now, the reason I mention ladies here is because nowadays so many women are out there riding and talking about how they work on their own bike, and so I imagine that whoever's watching this video, the women riding and doing what men have done forever, are wanting to learn how to do this and go ahead and do it themselves. Instead of paying a man to do it for you, be a biker and do your own work. At least this type of work. You can take the wheel off, you can replace brake pads. You might have to take the wheel to a shop that has a tire machine. Now, I have a tire machine and a balancer, so I'll go through that when we get to it. In either case, getting back to the job here, I'm going to try not to make this a rambling, too long of a video, but first thing, of course, what we want to do is we want to take off the saddlebags. We want to take off the side cover on the right-hand side, because this is where our brake caliper is attached to, and that'll give us more room to maneuver it out of position. Now, the other thing I want to mention too is when you push these brake pads back, this master cylinder reservoir up here is a watertight, airtight seal. So the fluid is going to back up out of the caliper into this. Now, if you have worn pads, you're going to have to push the piston back in the caliper quite a ways. What is going to happen is you're going to build up so much pressure in here that it'll pop the center of this out, and you will have brake fluid everywhere. And if you have .3 brake fluid, it will eat the paint up and cause all kinds of nasty damage. So, as far as the brake job part of it goes, what you want to do is you want to take the cover off of the master cylinder. You want to take something to suck the fluid out with, at least half of it or more. Take an old syringe, a turkey baster, whatever, an old turkey baster. Any of these things will work, and suck some of that fluid out of there so it won't spill over. Now, I have .5, which means it'll make a mess if I blow it out of there, but it won't ruin any of the paint. So most bikes have the .3 in it. So look, do it the right way, as I said. And as you can see, this axle shaft trying to come out this way is going to be right in between the lower mount for the saddlebag and the pipe, which is a very, tight fit. Now, once you raise the bike up to get the rear wheel off the ground so you can take the axle out, well, the swing arm's going to drop down right to the exhaust pipe and it's not going to come out. So as you can see from the side view, that's very low view there. And I'm going to show you how to do this without taking the muffler off, doing any of that bullshit. So basically, I'm going to loosen or take off both lower shock mounts, and then with a flat jack I'm going to maneuver the bike up and down to be able to get the axle out without any pressure being on it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my tools out. I'm going to set up the tripod so that this is going to be kind of a one-sided deal, but the same thing on this side. Depending on your axle nut, you've got a cotter key in there, or maybe a cotter pin that you have to fold back and yank out. Now I put one of these clips in there that I can just yank out like that. So I've made my life a little easier, and if you can, go to the hardware store and get one of them. It's a lot better than the cotter pin thing. You're going to want to take this cover out of the way as well, because we're going to be taking the belt off of the pulley and moving it out to the side to allow the wheel to come back out. And we're going to jack up the bike high enough to get this tire wheel out of the rear of the fender. So let me cut it off, let me get my things set up, and we'll continue on. Hopefully we'll get some good shots here. Okay, before we continue on here, I want to point out a few things you're going to need to remember. I've opened up the master cylinder and I've slurped out the brake fluid to the bottom. Now, if you have .3, throw that shit away and put fresh fluid in it. You know, well, once you back it out, slurp everything out of there and then put fresh fluid in it. Now, what I use for this is I have got a, this is a horse syringe that I got at a farm feed store supply place, you know, where they sell hay and all kinds of things for farm animals, stuff like that. And I picked up a bunch of those syringes there that work in multiple places, and they're cheap. They're only like $1 a piece, or $1.50, I think. So and you don't need the syringe. Well, you can get it if you want, but you know, you don't need the syringe part of it. The other thing I wanted to mention is on the cap on this master cylinder, there is a lip going around here, and that lip, when you put this back together again, that lip has to be over the side or the top into that groove on the outside. It has to be over that. If you put it on and you roll part of it under and don't see it, which is hard to see back here, especially on one that has the lower covers, you got to make sure that that thing is all the way around on the outside, or you're going to roll the lip and it's not going to function properly. It's going to leak and you're going to get water in there, which that's not good. The other thing is on mine, now this will apply to a lot of years, I think from 84 to maybe 2007, don't quote me on that. You know, these setups are a little bit different from year to year and whatever else, but the general job is the same. So anyway, on mine, the caliper has Torx fittings, and I've already gotten my bit out here. And the problem with these is there's a spring in there that retains the brake pads, and I'll show that to you after I get it off. And it is a bit of a chore to get that spring to clear, pushing it back. Now, sometimes you can take a screwdriver or something, you know, and push the whole thing over. Well, you can't actually push this, but you can get the brake pad to push. What I do is I generally pivot the thing and then, you know, get it to push back enough to where I can lift it off of the bracket. And also I'm going to take the shocks off. As you can see, my boot is ripped. And by the way, that boot, it does have a part number, and it's actually a Honda part number, because these are the same shocks that the Honda Goldwing, the 1500s, had on them. And Honda, years ago I remember, they did sell these boots for these shocks with a Honda part number, but this is the same shock that's on the back of a 1500 Goldwing. So in case you run into that, and I guess I better look into it too, I'd like to replace that boot, even though these shocks are getting very old, and I've changed the oil in them one time, but I don't think they'll last very long. A friend of mine gave me these after the originals failed. Thanks, Tony. Anyway, all right, let me get set up again with a tripod here, get the other tools going, and we'll get going on the job again. All right, we're back. Now I've got this thing on a flat jack. I'll give you a picture of the flat jack later. Now occasionally these Torx get very tight in here because they get a lot of weather and everything. And instead of trying to, you know, muscle them, here's a little trick. Put your socket in there, your fitting, your Torx bit, whatever, and give it a couple good cracks with a hammer. Just like that. Okay? And that will loosen, or help loosen it up. There. That was fairly tight. So sometimes these from the factory, if you're doing a newer bike, they'll have Loctite on them. So they're going to come out not like this, finger tight. And then also, when you take them apart, this pin that it slides on, this pin right here, make sure you coat that. If it's rusty or whatever, wire wheel it, clean it, or sandpaper it, whatever. And then coat the entire thing with some light coating of anti-seize. That will keep everything sliding better. Or if you can get it, the brake pad grease, which is meant for brake hardware, but anti-seize works just fine. Now everything that's coming apart on this does have a torque spec when putting it back together again. So if you don't have a shop manual, a service manual, then look up the okay, we were getting very tight there. Okay, see, that's what I did. I just rocked it around a little bit. Let's put that nipple cover back on there. We'll get this out of the way. We'll just leave it like that. And here are the brake pads, and I will be replacing these. Now, this brake pad here, when you take this off, oh good grief, wow, boy, that sucker is in there, will have the spring in the way. And the spring and the brake pad hold up the shim plates. These shim plates on the top and bottom. Now it's a little bit of a balancing act when you put it together, but the bottom one will stay put, the top obviously won't. As you can see, the outer side brake pad is thinner than the inner one, and that's because it gets a little bit more dirt on it. So anyway, we'll be replacing those. We're going to leave that spring on there. We're going to take the lower shim out, and those need to be cleaned up too. So now that we got that out of the way, we can go ahead and take our shocks loose. Now I've raised the bike just enough to where it just started to show a little bit of air between the tire and the lift. Now I do have a drop down lift, but I wasn't going to move my front clamp to bring the bike back enough for the drop down, which it would have been nicer to just drop the wheel down from under the bike if you have this type of lift, but most people don't, or you're doing it on the floor. So and I'm not going to move that clamp back and forth just for this. I usually use the clamp on the front setting anyway. So anyway, and of course you will be more than likely doing this without air tools, but this just gets the job done a little quicker. Again, these are all going to have torque specs. Make sure they're clean. You can put a little bit of Loctite on them if you like, but it's not necessary. Alright, so we've taken our lower shock mounts loose. And now what we can do, you can move the shock if you want a little bit by loosening the top mount. Actually, let me go ahead and do that. We'll loosen the top mount so that I can move the shocks around a little bit better. You know, I'm trying to remember. Alright, let's just continue on with the job. Oh yeah, I do have to move the shocks because I'm going to have to bring that up. So this, just loosen it up. These are air shocks, so if they were not air shocks, I would take them off the bike. I just, get them out of the way. But since they do have airlines on it and I don't feel like popping the airlines, I'm not taking them off the bike. So now what we want to do, let's walk around the other side here. Let's see if we can do this. Let's see how we're going to look at this. I think we can see the axle pretty good from here. So I've already removed my clip from the axle. And basically what we want to do is just loosen this side. Now the other side of the axle may spin and you might have to put a wrench on it. Mine didn't, so I always try it that way first. If I feel that it's slipping, then just put a wrench on the other side, and you can hold it or somebody else can hold it if you can reach around one of these things in the back. Okay, taking our axle nut off. There's a big washer there, and it doesn't want to let loose. Let me get a screwdriver here to pop that off. There we go. And by the way, we will be greasing the rear wheel bearings while we got this all apart. And that is a good time to do it because you have the wheel off. So you might want to get a new pair of seals, wheel bearing seals. If the grease is real bad, you'll need to wash them out and then re-grease them. And in case you need new ones, most of the Harley wheel seals are just general seals that you can pick up for a hell of a lot cheaper at the auto parts store. Just get the number off the wheel bearing itself. That's what I meant to say. The wheel bearing you can get at auto parts store. So if you let's see if I can do this without a mallet. No, I can't. Let me get a punch. Sorry about that. Trying not to have this take too much time. Just grab a punch, there's a little dimple in there. Go ahead and pop that back. Alright, to where it's out enough on the other side. Now, here's the flat jack that's under the bike. Of course, if you use it and do it like I'm doing it, mount this as far back as possible. You're going to need to secure the front of the bike somehow to the ground so it doesn't pick up also. You're trying to jack only the back of the bike up. There's multiple ways of doing that. You can even drill a couple holes into the concrete floor, put some lags in there, and the brake caliper is going to be in the way. yeah, let me move that so we can see what we're doing from the camera angle point of view. So in either case, you can put a couple of lags into the ground and bolt some big eye hooks into it. Now, see, this is not going to come past here, and if I go down, it's not going to clear the pipe. This is why a lot of people, either they'll take this bracket off the top, which comes out, but they're a pain in the ass because they're usually frozen in there, or they'll take the slip-on muffler off. We're not going to do that here. What we're going to do, come to this side, and we're going to lower the bike. Now you want to make sure your shocks are cleared so they're not hanging on to anything. And we got us a lowrider. Lowrider. Okay. So anyway, now the axle, as you see, comes right out of there without taking any of that apart. Isn't that fucking wonderful? Alright. So, let's put our axle out of the way. That's got a good amount of grease on it, and you do want to grease that up a little bit when you put it all back together again. So now we can jack up the bike again, and then we get to take the wheel out by jacking the bike up really up high. And what's going to happen is all our spacers are going to fall out. Now on mine, this is part of the spacer, the brake caliper mount, which makes, you know, the way it's mounted, it makes it a little bit difficult over here. And what I'm also going to do, let me get the camera over here. It's kind of a pain in the ass. I wish I knew how to edit two cameras together. Okay, what I'm going to do here, let's see, can we see anything? I think we can. Okay, we're going to jack the bike back up again with a flat jack. Oh, gosh. And as you can see, the wheel is staying right where it's at. Let's take our spacer out of there. If we can get it out of there, and we can move it. Doink, there it is. There's the one wheel spacer. And now we can roll our wheel forward enough to where we can take the belt. Get out of the way. God damn, I need a rag. Okay. We can take the belt off the pulley carefully. Don't twist it. And what you're going to do is you're just going to lay it off to the side like that. So now the wheel can roll backwards and out without changing the adjustment on the rear belt, without doing anything. So we'll go back over to the other side. And we're going to remove our brake bracket, which this is always a fun job. Get this down here. Okay, well, alright. We can roll the wheel forward now. Part of the spacer back here is this one as well. And you want to take note which side was in the seal. That'll be the good clean side. You don't want to run this side. And this side is chamfered. It has a chamfered edge on it, so it goes into the seal. This side has a square edge on it. It'll rip the seal. So you want to clean this up too, and put a light coat of grease on that, or the seal itself, so that it can go back in there. So now what we got to do is we got to jack the bike up And instead of wasting a lot of time watching me grunt and strain jacking it up, I'll start the camera again once I have it up in place. Okay, as you can see, I've got the bike up quite a ways. Not quite sure if it's enough yet or whatever, but you're not going to be able to roll the back tire out, but you will be able to get it out at an angle. We can get our swing arm out of the way. I don't have enough movement. Alright, let me crank it up a little bit more. That's enough to clear that rotor on this side. I think that should do it. Okay, and there we go. We've got us a wheel out, and now we get to change a tire. And I got to go clean up my tire machine. Plus, what I'm going to do here too is the valve stems on these wheels are at such a bad angle that I've got a 90-degree valve stem that I already had here. I've already changed it on the front, but I'm going to do away with a straight one and do the 90, and that way you can get a gauge in there better, and air chuck or anything like that. Now, some places their tire machine won't allow you to leave the rotor on or the pulley, and that's a whole other story. Now, my tire machine, I'm fine. I can put it on the tire machine with everything left on the wheel. Most places can, realistically, but check before you take it somewhere. So let me cut it off again, and I'm going to get the tire machine cleaned off so we can go in there and change the tire out to the new one. Okay, the air compressor is done aggravating me. First thing you want to do, of course, is let all the air out of the tire. That's just pulling the valve stem out. And now breaking the bead, of course, I mean, I've heard of people driving cars over them with a piece of wood, or using a piece of wood with leverage under a bumper of a car. There's all kinds of funky methods, and these are very hard to break the bead on. So in either case, go around. Now I got wood there because these rims are a little bit different than a car rim. Okay, so that broke one side loose. Now we gotta do the other. Ready? I know it looks very easy to break the bead on these with a machine like this. Okay, we've broken both sides of the bead now. We get to put this on the machine. Oh, God. And mine clamps underneath. You gotta make sure that you're in the rim. And then there. Alright. The wheel is clamped in. Want to get the rest of the bead broken off. If you try to pull one of these off with a couple screwdrivers, you're barking up the wrong tree. Anyway, some soapy water. I want to get some good soapy water down in there. Or you can use a lot of different things like, some kind of lubricant that'll dry up. You don't want to use any oil-based lubricant because then the tire may spin, and you know, it's just not. Let me do my adjustment here. Gosh, I don't use this equipment enough anymore. Everything's getting stiff, like me. What we're trying to do here is go just inside. Holy hell. Wow. I'm gonna have to clean that up after this job. All right, give me a minute. I gotta clean that thing up. Okay, machine is cleaned up. Let me see if I didn't lose my focus here. Turn that up just a little bit. Okay. So now that I've got that thing working right, what we want to do is we want to get in here, grab that, make sure the bead's under there, get that over the machine, like that. Then we're going to rotate. Oops. Oops. Yeah, that's the problem with these things. Sometimes they like to give you a problem. There we go. All right, baby. There we go. Okay. A little bit more, and then gotta get onto the other one. Same thing. And there we go. We got us a tire off. And now we get to throw that on the heap. Now what we want to do is, while we got it open, release it. We're going to turn it over. We're going to do our valve stem, which is a bolt-in type. So we're going to need a wrench. We're going to do that. Now I think stock usually come with a rubber valve stem, which if you get these metal ones, you never have to really replace them. And they don't break either. So the rubber ones, they dry rot, just like anything rubber. And it's not the best way in the world to go. In case you don't know what I mean by the rubber ones, it's a valve stem like that. You know, it's rubber and it just snaps into place. They're easy to put in. I mean, you just put them in there, use a tool and pop it in. But this here, you won't have to dick with it ever again. And you can get one with an angle on it. So let me put this over here. I got my new one already. Now this bolts up from the inside. So I'm going to have to get a 14mm socket for this one. And with these, if you do decide to do it, which it's a smart move, but lubricate that rubber a little bit. And the rubber has a lip on it, and that lip has to go into the hole perfectly all the way around. So when you're doing these, it is a bit of a tricky situation because it's in a recess. And I need a 1/4-inch drive socket to get in there because it's in a recess, you know, it's machined. And this nut is almost exactly that size, and you want to position it to where you can get it at it easy. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to remount the rim, and we'll install the new tire, and I'll show you a few things on that. Alright, let's move a little closer here. See what I'm doing. I know it's kind of dark in here. It looks dark on the camera anyway. Alright, now let's remove our wheel bearings and the seals. Now if you're going to reuse the seal, try to do this relatively carefully and work it around so you don't break the seal. Yeah, they're in there pretty damn tight. Oh, shit. Alright. Hang on. Okay, I needed a little bit more of a leverage here to get under it. So, all you're doing is working it out. If you bend it up or fuck it up, make sure the spring stays in there. There's a spring. And then also, the bearing. Keep the same side bearing in the same side of the wheel. Don't swap them over. They're used to going in one direction mainly, and that direction is kind of ingrained in the metal, so you don't want it spinning the other way around. Another note is you've got some washers and shims in there that give you your spacing for your bearings, so that you have the right end play. And in here is also a tube there, and all that has to be lined up when you put it back together again, or the axle is not going to go through it. So you're going to have to be very careful doing that. Pay attention and you'll be in good shape. So now we'll get to clean that up. And what I'm going to do before I mount the tire is I am going to clean all this stuff up. And basically I'm just going to wipe this out of there, the old grease, and I'm going to be using the same type of grease that I used previously. You don't really want to mix different grease brands. Now if you're just starting to do this and you're trying to grease it up with a different grease than what was in it, like the factory grease, you can go to Harley and buy the factory grease, which is what I've done. I bought a tub of their grease a long time ago, so I continue to use that. If you get new grease or different grease, then you're going to have to clean this all shiny up where there's none of the old stuff left, and then re-grease the bearings after you've cleaned them. Put your new seals on, or if you don't have the new ones, put the old ones on if you haven't destroyed them. If you buggered up the old seal, do not put it on. You will get water in there and it will rot those bearings to death in no time. So, and I do have the valve stem on, and I did want to mention that if you've gotten to this point without the machine, that the first thing you want to do before you even forget and mount the tire is you want to take the valve stem out of the stem out of the valve core. The valve core out of the valve stem. I'm talking gibberish here. I haven't had enough beer. Where's my tool? There it is. Okay, you want to take that out, because when you're trying to seat the bead, you want to get a blow of air in there without any restriction. And if you leave the core in there, it'll restrict the air. So once you get the tire on it and you want to pop the bead up, what's going to happen is it'll seat the bead, and then you can let the air go completely out. It's not going to come off the bead, and then put your valve stem back in and air the tire up to the proper pressure. So we will go through that in a little bit anyway. I'm going to do my bearings now, which that's not very interesting. I'm going to pull the other side out, clean that up, and then I'm going to put all that together again, and then we'll get back on this with mounting the tire. Okay, the bearings are greased, seals are cleaned. I cleaned my spacer and put it on this side to keep the tube that we took out of there in the retainer. There's a retainer on the other side, because that bearing moves in and out. So it has to be tied up against the other bearing and then go through that retainer to keep that in line. Now, when working on the wheel, remember to keep an eye on this so it doesn't fall out on you, which it will trying to put it on the bike. It's going to start to move around. All right, next point of interest here is that here's the new shoes, and on these new shoes you will see a direction of rotation. That has to go on the direction that the bike travels normally, which is forward. So make sure you got that right. And the other thing is that tires come with a dot on them right here, this dot, okay? That indicates that this is the spot where they want you to mount this in conjunction with your valve stem. So you want to get this as close to the valve stem as possible, well, right there. And then when you balance, all right, if you've got a real crazy amount of weight that you have to add to the wheel, which you shouldn't, what you're going to have to do is break down the bead again and then rotate the tire 180 degrees, or to where the heavy spot is. Try to move this dot around. I usually go 180, and you'll find out that the weight all of a sudden is set off by the weight of the tire, so you don't have to add as much weight. Now, it's a lot of work to break the bead again on a tire, but it's better than having 2 pounds of weight on a wheel, which you shouldn't have. And I do static balancing. My dynamic balancer there's for car tires, and will not do motorcycle tires or wheels, because the bearings aren't big enough to go in there. And the other thing is, you've got to slop this up with some soapy stuff really good, because if you don't, it's not going to want to seat the bead. So get it all over the place. It's going to make a mess, and you can clean that mess up later on. So now we want to go in the direction of rotation, which the belt drive is this way. So we've got an arrow on the other side. Yes, yes. And that is our, where is it? Where's the arrow? Okay, this is the direction of rotation. Now, what we want to do, because they put the mark on the wrong side that we can't see, we're going to want to get a marker real quick here before that soap dries up. And we're going to have to look where the dot is on this side and come straight across from there and make a dot over here. Okay? This is a paint marker. So now we have the dot on the other side, and we can line it up. Get this over here. Get her set in there. Okay. What we're going to do is, where did the dot go? Where is my valve stem? It's over here. So we're going to rotate this on there until it's close to the valve stem. Then we're going to go ahead and seat that bead in. Okay. Now, do the same with this side. Okay. I'm going to get that close to the valve stem as possible on this machine. Whoops, whoops, whoops. It doesn't want to go down there, does it? Yeah, it does. There we go. Whoops. Alright, I'm going to have to back that up. Shit. Yeah, that's what happens sometimes. Goddamn, tires and parts. Oh, I think that just kind of broke off there. Alright. It did. So we're going to have to come around again. Like I said, these are mighty stiff sidewalls, so now we're going to let that seat in. There we go. Okay. Now, we've got to muscle this over to the dot with the valve stem. There we go. And let's let that go. We take, oh shit, man, I'm getting too old for this shit. Take that off. Get our arms out of the way. And we're going to seat the rim now. Seat the bead, rather. And I'm going to do that with this. Whoops. That isn't working worth a shit. Alright. That new valve stem is... This is the problem with these things. It's gonna go pop, pop. 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 There. Now what you want to do, put your valve stem core back in there. See what I'm doing here. And you're going to want to look on both sides of the rim and tire to make sure that there's no funkiness. There's like a line going around the tire on both sides. That the line is evenly around the rim and nothing is in there, which means the bead has seated and popped onto the rim. So now I air up the tire and I get to balancing. Alright, balancing stand is out and hooked up. Now, if you don't have one of these, and this is a NOMAR, N-O-M-A-R, balancing, static balancing stand for motorcycle tires and everything else. It's worth it to get it if you're going to do this type of work yourself a lot, you know, or for buddies and stuff, yeah. These are zero friction rollers, so they're very, very sensitive. And the thing is, you can do this if it's a one-time deal or you're only doing your own, you know, and it's a rear tire, which doesn't matter that much. Well, it should anyway, because it'll keep it from cupping. You can put your axle in with a bunch of shims or whatever, tighten it down just, you know, finger tight, and then put it on 2 car jack stands or whatever in between it. And let the bearings do it. But remember, you've got greased bearings, so they're going to create a lot of friction. This thing here, basically what you're trying to do is you'll notice that I turn it and the valve stem comes to the top again. So this is the light side and the heavy side is going to be down there. Or I'm sorry. Yeah, the heavy side is down there. So we've got weights over here, the tape-on weights that I use. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a couple of them off because this tire isn't really that far out of whack. I'm just going to take a utility knife and I'm going to take 2 of them out of there, going down to the other side. Okay, and we're going to see as it's still moving. Not too bad there at all. So basically what you want to do is you want to balance the tire to where it doesn't really hammer off of the thing like this. That's too much. That's too fast. If it just barely moves and very little, you're going to get the same thing and you got to wait for it to stop. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut all of them off. Now, of course, you can't reuse these. There we go. Okay. You can melt them down or feed them to your enemy, they're lead. So now we've got the light side right about where the weights used to be, pretty much straight up. So we're talking more in this area here, and we can go this way again and see if it takes off running like it did in the other direction, and it does. So we're going to have to put a little bit of weight up there, and now I'm going to have to get a little bit of brake cleaner and a rag, a nice clean rag. I'm going to have to clean this up so that the new weights will stick to it, and I'm going to get busy doing that, dig out my weights and clean that up, and I will be back when I have it balanced up. Alright, we're balanced up here. It took right around 1.5 ounces of weight, which 2 ounces is about the limit until you start moving the tire. And basically, you don't want the thing shooting off in the wrong direction. Pretty much staying where you have it. It's not hauling ass, you know, in a lot of weight. So pretty much wherever I'm putting it, you know, it's kind of staying there. So that's about as good of a balance as you're going to get. You can go and really get it perfect, you know, by moving the tire a little and then taking weights on and off. And well, stick-on weights are a little bit expensive, but you know, that's how that works. So I stuck a few weights around, you know, where it was light, and that's it. So it's a balance. Now let me go ahead and fight this thing and put it back on the bike, and I think we'll start this back up again when we do the brake pads, because putting it on the bike is just the reverse of taking it off, except you're fighting those spacers, you know, to keep them from falling out while you're getting it up in there. And that's not a lot of fun to watch. So anyway, we'll stop it here, and we'll get back on the brake pads and go there and finish. Alright kids, the wheel is in after dropping the spacers 3 times or so, and the axle's in. No biggie, that happens every time, or at least it does with me. So the torque specs on my bike for the shock absorbers are 40 foot-pounds on both the top and lower bolts. Please do use a torque wrench on this shit. Don't just hammer down on it. If you don't have a torque wrench, don't do the friggin' job, because you don't have the right tools. Even if you go to Harbor Freight and buy a cheap one, that's better than nothing. And those will work fine pretty much, unless you're a professional and you're using them all day long. So, and remember, if you do have a torque wrench and it's your first one, always bring it down to the least setting, the last, you know, the bottom setting of it. I wish I could see what I'm doing. It's 10 and 5. There we go. Okay. So 40 foot-pounds on the shocks. Now remember, this is my model, and this should also be for, you know, most of the 90s models and the early 2000s, I think until 2002 or 3, something like that. But look, you can check the internet for torque specs. The bolts for the caliper are going to be 20 foot-pounds. And I got to look up what the axle nut is, but I'm going to give you another little trick, I'm going to give you another trick here. The reason these swing arms crack. Alright, sorry about the cutoff there, or whatever the hell happened. My GoPro battery died, and that's probably due to the fact that I'm not making very many videos here, even though I try to charge it every month or so. In either case, let me get back to what I was saying here. Torque wrench. Buy yourself a torque wrench if you don't have one. Even a cheap Harbor Freight one will do. The torque specs on this bike are 40 pounds on the shock absorber bolts, 20 pounds on the caliper, and I got to look up what it is for the axle nut. I can't remember. I think it's 60, but I'll verify that. Now, these swing arms on the 90s and early 2000s had a tendency to crack back here. They crack right where the axle nut is, and they crack at the bottom usually. And what I've done here, this is not the original swing arm. Mine did crack, and I saw what was going on. This washer actually wallowed around in there, and the reason for that is that when people reinstall the tire, they will torque this nut down while the wheel is off the ground, and this slot in here has movement up and down. So if you tighten it with this thing hanging down, you know, the weight of the wheel down on it, it'll be to the bottom of that groove, and as you ride, it'll try to work its way up to the top of that slot. So what happens is it weakens the metal really badly. Now the trick to that is nothing crazy here. You just hand tighten that, and then you know, wind down, whoops, let me turn that the other way. Wind down your jack until the full weight of the bike is on the axle. And this way, you've got the axle at the top of the slot, and it's not going to try to work its way up when it's tightened down. Now you can tighten it down because everything's back into adjustment the way it was, because I didn't change anything. I just pulled the axle out. I didn't change any of the settings because everything was good. So the there, my boot came off. Anyway, that is how to keep your swing arm from cracking, by bringing that up. Of course, you know, if you do have an older model or something, I would be preemptive about it and go ahead and find somebody that does a little bit of welding. They can move the shocks out of the way and just weld a gusset plate on top of it like I did, and it goes all the way to the back to the shock mount. That way this can't flex if it does get weakened for some reason, which it shouldn't anymore because I'm tightening this now with the weight of the bike on it, and the axle is to the top of the slot. So I hope I made that kind of clear. And I welded both sides of the swing arm with gusset plates, even though the right side of the bike really does not crack, but nevertheless I put a gusset plate in there anyway. So let me go ahead and torque that down, and then I'm going to be cleaning. I'll be washing my hands, and I'll be taking some lacquer thinner. You can use brake clean too, but lacquer thinner is better. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the bike up after torquing the axle, and I'm going to take a very clean rag, clean hands, and I'm going to wipe down the rotor to get all the grease off of it and all the, you know, junk, because you don't want that on your brake pads. So I'll wipe that off, and especially since we're putting new brake pads in it, we don't want them getting grease on them or anything like that. And once that's been wiped off, we'll get back on it. I will try to install the brake pads holding this camera, and I don't know how much battery I got left in this, so we'll cut it off here, and I'll get to torquing that down. I'll give you the torque specs when I get back on the axle nut. Okay, yes, the rear axle nut was 60 pounds. Anyway, okay, we're going to go with the brake job now, finish that up. What I've done here is I put a C-clamp in there, and the reason I did that is because the C-clamp will push the piston back straight. If you do it with a pair of channel locks or, you know, pliers or a screwdriver, you're going to cock the piston, and you may damage something, you may not. Plus channel locks are going to dig into stuff, so C-clamp, and you can pick them up cheap at Harbor Freight or, you know, whatever, Lowe's, Home Depot too. So what you're doing is you're just going to back the piston down slowly And what you're going to do is you're going to keep an eye on the master cylinder, because you're pumping fluid back in there to make sure that it doesn't overflow. So we're pushing it back just with a couple fingers until you feel the resistance where it stops. Don't crank any further than that. That's it, you're done. And then take your C-clamp off, which of course I got to rewind like a nutcase here because it's got to go through this. I have a tool for automatic brake caliper piston reversal when it's a car caliper, which doesn't have that captured in inside. And I've got factory Harley pads for the rear. They seem to last a hell of a lot longer than the aftermarket stuff, and they're nice enough to give you the new shims. So you want to put the bottom shim in there, and then you want to put the top one in with the brake pad. So you're going to put it in up here, and then you're going to take the brake pad, you're going to put it on the bottom one, and then you're going to do that, push it on there. It's supposed to be tight because it keeps them from rattling. And then you're going to do the same thing with the back one. Now I hope you guys can see this. Okay, there. So there are brake pads installed. And where did my spring go? I have it here. I had it here a minute ago. And I did already clean the rotor up. Oh, good grief, there it is. Okay, this spring goes into the back and it hooks up under there. You'll feel where it hooks in. And it kind of clips over that front brake pad, holding it in as well. Now I can't get the goddamn hole. There it is. Whoops. That's not right. I went into the hole of the anyway. Alright, this is kind of fidgety. So there we go, I got it. Okay. This goes down here and you lay it over the top of this pad, which it isn't wanting to do right now. Alright, there we go. There. And there. Click, click. You'll know when it's right. It'll be right across the pad, the top, the bottom, and it'll come over the top of this. And that's it. That holds everything in place. Now you put your caliper back over it, which of course is always going to be a fight because, well, everything's a fight on a goddamn machine. So want to get that there, make sure your holes are lined up, and now I'm going to go ahead and coat my bolts that go in here and then torque that down. Okay, all cleaned up, and I got a little bit of anti-seize on there. Don't go crazy with that. You don't need a ton of it. You're just going to put those pins in there to line up, and basically we're just going to tighten that down. Now, one thing I did want to mention while I'm looking for my driver here is that remember with new brake pads that they are going to have to seat in. They're not going to work like perfect right off the bat. They're going to be a little bit, yeah, you got to shake it around, make sure everything goes together smoothly. Don't force it. If it feels like it's cross-threading, don't keep forcing it. Too many people try to make things happen when it shouldn't be happening. Again, the brake pads will not work 100% until you've got some mileage on it and they've seated in. especially on an older rotor, which may be a little bit, you know, out of whack. And the same thing goes for a tire. A tire really isn't seated in until you have got about 100 miles on it to scrub off that original fabrication layer on the tire. So don't go crazy cornering until you've got about 100 miles on the tire to where it's got the good rubber out there. And okay, are we at 20 pounds? We are at 20 pounds, so you'll see that this doesn't take a lot. These don't need to be cranked down with some brute strength or anything else. It actually, I think something's slipping here. My socket is. So there we go. It's in now. Okay, that's what was going on. Nope, still slipping. All right, well, I gotta get another tool here. So in either case, you get the idea. This, you torque them down. It's just 20 foot-pounds. It's not very tight at all, so don't get gorilla. But that's the job, and then just put everything back together again, and there's a tire change on a bagger. What fun. So good luck to anybody that wants to give it a shot, and I'll talk to y'all later.